How's it going, YouTube lovers? This is the Eagle Builder Animator, and welcome back to another Bird Brain Theory. Today, I am once again going to be talking about Avengers Endgame. It was such a fitting conclusion to the Infinity Saga of the MCU, past 11 years of incredible movies. Oh, but before I go any further, if it wasn't obvious enough already, spoiler warning, big fat spoiler warning, because this time, instead of predicting stuff about Endgame, I'm talking about stuff that actually happened in Endgame. So, definitely want to turn away, but come on, I mean, this movie has made $2 billion in just the first two opening weekends, in the time between them. It's amazing. So, I don't know who hasn't seen it already, but if you haven't, just turn away now. Last chance. But anyway, today I'm going to be talking about the branch timelines of Endgame, because Cap did go back in time and put stones back, but still a number of branch timelines are still active. So what I'm going to be talking about today is not only will I be elaborating a little bit further on what I just talked about with explaining the basics of time travel in the MCU, but also what is the current state of the MCU timeline and how everything is looking after Endgame, what this means for the future. So anyway, let's go ahead and break this down and start with how does time travel in the MCU actually work? So, unlike what I said in my bird brain theory last time, it is not Back to the Future style, where stuff fades away or changes the future if you change the past. Hulk gives us an explanation, but it's almost more confusing when you hear it for the first time in the theaters. When he says, if you travel in the past, that past becomes your future, and your former present becomes the past, which can't now be changed by your new future. I was definitely scratching my head when I heard this in the theaters, but here, let me try to explain a little bit more what this means. The basic idea, of course, is that changing the past doesn't affect your own past. Instead, this creates a branch in the timeline where the main timeline is still your own, but this new branch is affected by whatever you did in the past. And the Ancient One actually explains this a little bit better than Banner does when she talks to him during the Battle of New York. But then Banner also says that putting the stones back would fix the branches, and the Ancient One doesn't have a problem with this. So this means that only major changes will result in a permanent branch. So obviously, I mean, going back in time is going to change something. I mean, even if they were only going for the time stone when they went to go to New York, they still would have had a conversation with the Ancient One, and that would have completely messed up stuff in the timeline. But it doesn't really have a long-lasting effect. It may have messed things up for the immediate timeline, but the Ancient One never told anyone anything anyway, so after the events of Doctor Strange, everything would have been completely back to normal. So this is why Cap said he is able to clip the branches by simply returning the stones and Mjolnir, even though these changes have taken place. So those are the basics. Major changes will create a branch. Minor changes may make like a pseudo branch, but those can heal up pretty quickly. And that's basically how time travel works in the MCU. So now that we understand that, let's take a look at what branches actually still exist in the MCU after the events of Endgame. So the Avengers ended up creating a lot of branches when they went back to remove the stones from those different years. But Cap, of course, at the end of Endgame, went back and fixed most of them. But this wouldn't fix all of them. I believe that there are still 3 branches that are active in the MCU. And I think that 4 were actually created, but 1 of them closed. And I'll explain that a little bit later. So, let's put this on screen. I'm going to use this chart to explain. So, this red line is the main MCU timeline, beginning in, of course, Captain America, the first Avenger, and more recently ending in Endgame. So let's talk about what branches still exist. The first branch, I believe is the most obvious, begins in 2012. This is when the Avengers tried to take the Space Stone, but Hulk from the past interfered and Loki used the Tesseract to escape. So, obviously, I mean, we've all seen the first Avengers movie. That was, like, honestly still my favorite MCU movie of all time. And we know Loki's supposed to go back to Asgard with Thor, where he remains imprisoned until Thor the Dark World. So now we have a branch where he escapes. Now, I believe this is where Loki's Disney Plus show is going to take place. I mean, we all know that he dies at the beginning of Infinity War, so while it could be set, like, between time periods when he's still causing mischief. I believe that they're going to take it into this new branch timeline that gives them a whole new array of mischief for Loki to explore, and I think that's actually going to be a ton of fun. The next branch I believe still exists begins in 2014 with, of course, the events during Guardians of the Galaxy. This is when, in Endgame, past Thanos discovered the Avengers' plan and traveled to the future to attack the Avengers facility. Now, this timeline would obviously be very vastly different from the MCU's main timeline. As we know, Thanos and his army never got to return to that timeline. I mean, even the past Nebula was shot by our Nebula. And the As Guardians of the Galaxy scene seemed to imply that 2014's Gamora is still in our timeline, and that's definitely setting up Guardians 3. So the bad news about this particular timeline is because Thanos isn't there and trying to get the stone and everything, there's a chance that no Guardians of the Galaxy would ever form. But there is good news for the people in this timeline, is that Thanos and his army are gone. The slaughters stop. Now this is honestly bringing up another Disney Plus. This is where I think the WandaVision show will take place. Which, still, that name is so lame I can hardly say how. Because there are two options for this show, kind of like with the Loki one. It could take in the past to the main MCU timeline before Vision dies at the end of Infinity War, or it could be in this branch timeline. So it could be easily set in the past. There's no Thanos to kill Vision. So it can easily take place, I believe, in this timeline, which, because they said they're going to be branching off into more cosmic and mystical stuff, I think this would make a ton of sense for them to make use of the branches established in Endgame. This next branch presumably begins in 1970. Now, this would be after Cap returns the Tesseract, and he stays. And of course, he lives out the rest of his life with Peggy. But unlike the other branches, this one actually closes back up, and it merges with the main timeline by the end of Endgame, where of course Cap returns and he gives Sam a shield. But the only difference that we have in this timeline is that Cap is living in the background during everything else in the MCU. Now, while this definitely changes up a bit of Peggy's plotline, after her death in The Winter Soldier, I believe that that's where things would start to blend back together slowly until coming full-on back to normal in Endgame. Because it definitely seems like Cap at this point would have been taking a Stan Lee Watcher-style vow of non-interference, and he would have let everything play out, and then he just came back in at the moment that he left. So that timeline did exist, but everything on that is back to normal. However, I believe that there is actually a fourth branch that also begins in 1970. Now, this is not due to a stone being removed or a character remaining behind. This branch is a result of Tony and Howard Stark. Because we have Tony talking to his dad and giving him fatherly advice. I mean, Iron Man's origin, especially the way it's built up in Iron Man 2, is largely influenced by the rocky relationship he had with his father. But, like I said, Tony gave fatherly advice to his own dad because at this point, Tony had been a father to Morgan for years. So this could end up leading to a completely different childhood for that version of Tony, like starting from that branch, and that could influence his decisions as an adult and potentially change Iron Man as we know forever, but in that timeline. So, there you go, this crazy looking graph I got going here, but on screen for you, screenshot if you want. That is what I believe the current state of the MCU is. So before I go, you can see the graph up there real fast. Let's wipe it clean for a second. I'll do one more quick overview for you guys. First is, of course, that a branch begins in 2012 from the Avengers, and that this is where the Loki show is going to take place because he escapes with the Tesseract. Next branch, I believe, begins in 2014, which is, of course, a big one because Thanos no longer exists in it, potentially affecting the formation of the Guardians, but this is going to also possibly be where WandaVision takes place. And then, of course, we have the timeline that ended up closing, which is Captain America, starting in 1970, ending in 2023. But another branch, I believe, began in 1970 that has to do with the origins of Iron Man and the fact that he talked to his dad, giving him fatherly advice. But we'll just have to wait until next year to see how this factors into Phase 4, because Disney Plus is starting up, but that's going to be the end of this year, and even the Loki show they said was going to be Phase 2 of Disney Plus, and we're not going to be getting another MCU movie until a year after Far From Home, so we're really going to have to wait and see how this all plays out. But I hope you all enjoyed today's video. Please drop a like and leave a comment down below if you did. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already, and help me reach 1,000 subscribers. And I'll see you all on the next one. Bye, guys!